Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Special program today. The first half of the program, I'll be talking with the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest. His name is Yinam Cohen. He'll correct me momentarily if I've mispronounced his name, but he's a career diplomat with 16 years of experience in the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Before coming to Chicago, where he's based now, he held the position of Senior Policy Advisor to Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi and Director of Policy Department in the Minister's Bureau. Prior to that, Consul General Cohen was the Director of the UN Political Affairs Department, where he oversaw Israel's diplomatic campaigns in the UN Security Council and General Assembly in Israel. Between 2015 and 2018, he served as Deputy Chief of Mission in the Embassy of Israel in Madrid, Spain. There he led the diplomatic dialogue with the Spanish government and outreach to Spain's parliament and political parties. Previously, he has served as spokesperson and press attaché at the Embassy of Israel in Berlin, Germany, and as Deputy Chief of Mission in Bogota, Colombia. From 2012 to 2015, he was a diplomatic advisor to 3 consecutive Director Generals of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Prior to his diplomatic career, he worked as a strategic consultant at Sheldor Limited. He holds an MBA cum laude as well as a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, both from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He likes exploring new food, new cuisines, tries to balance the intake of calories with daily jogging. He speaks English, Hebrew, Spanish, and German. Born in Jerusalem in '76, he's married to Ayelet. They have 3 children. I'm so pleased to meet you, and thank you, Yinam. Tell me if I'm pronouncing your name properly. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You did a great job. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Well, such a great resume. Well, the whole world is looking at what's happening in Israel and Gaza, and we want to jump right in. And my goal as a journalist and communicator is to speak directly to the source. And I'm pleased that you at the Consul have reached out and agreed to connect. And I want to start with having you give background from the point of view of the Israeli government and the Israeli people of the conflict that we're witnessing every day in Gaza. So let me start with that.
Yes, thank you. And again, thank you for having me. It means a lot to me. Everything started 2 months ago on October 7th, when 3,000 Hamas terrorists intruded Israel, stormed more than 30 communities and a music festival, massacring 1,200 people, the biggest killing, the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. 1,200 people. We're talking about women that have been, raped and then killed in front of their children, parents who have been killed in front of their children, babies who have been set on fire and killed, siblings who have been tied behind their back to each other and then set on fire while still alive and killed. This is barbarism that we haven't seen in modern history, I would say. And it's not me who says that. We're listening to many journalists who have been exposed to I don't know if you heard about the famous video that documents 47 minutes, some of the atrocities that happened on this day. What they're saying is that they have never seen such a thing before, not even when they covered what ISIS did in Syria and Iraq. So this is barbarism that we've never seen before. In addition to that, more than 240 people were abducted from Israel by Hamas terrorists and were held hostage in the Gaza Strip in underground tunnels. We're talking about more than 30 kids, a lot of elderly people, women. Many of them were non-Israelis from more than 30 nationalities. So more than 100 of them were already released, but we're still having more than 130 hostages being held right now in the Gaza Strip. And this is basically what we're fighting for. And this is why Israel decided to go on an operation, a military operation, to eradicate the leadership of Hamas and the infrastructure of Hamas, to make sure that they won't be able to perpetrate again what they did on October 7th. And, we listen very carefully to what they have to say, what Hamas leadership have to say. And they say it very publicly, openly, on TV stations, recently last week, that if they have the capability, they will do it over and over again. So it's our obligation to make sure that our country is safe, that our people are safe, and this is what we're doing in Gaza right now.
You use the term eradicate Hamas. Is that possible? Is it doable? And from the distance, from a layman's point of view, my perception, perhaps ill-informed, is that the idea of Hamas is really broadly based in the people of Palestine. Am I incorrect? And if I am incorrect, then is it possible to eradicate Hamas without eradicating all of the Palestinian people?
Oh my God, no, we're not in war against the Palestinians. We're in war against the terrorists. As much as the United States was at war against ISIS and succeeded, we're going to succeed eradicating Hamas. Now, your question is very correct, and I want to take it very seriously and try to answer that. What we're doing right now as a first stage is eradicating the terrorist capabilities of Hamas, the terrorist infrastructure, and the terrorist leadership. You're also correct that I would say some of the ideas that Hamas promotes about killing Jews, about eradicating the Jewish states, are well established and well embedded among many of the Palestinians. Not all of them, of course, but I would say an important part of the Palestinian people. So I think, and that is very important, that the second stage that would last not months but years would be after the war, would be to with the support of many of our Arab neighbors who support Israel and who have peace with Israel, with the support of the United States, maybe NATO, the European Union, is to make sure that there is a new governing body in the Gaza Strip, a new government that promotes peace, that promotes democracy, that promotes freedom. And what we need to do is to eradicate the ideas, to uproot the ideas of hatred, of racism, of anti-Semitism against Jews and against the Israelis.
Let's
And
take a
that
minute.
we'll be able to do that only through education, of course.
Let's take a minute and go back and sort of put things in context. Take a second, if you would, or a few minutes to talk about Israel 101, I'll call it. Talk about the historical context, the historical relationship between Jews and Arabs, the Jews and Muslims in that region, in Palestine and in Israel. So give the long view. This conflict didn't start in 48 even, I don't think. But you tell me, what's the long picture?
Jews and Muslims have lived in this region for many years, for hundreds or maybe thousands of years, together most of the time, in peaceful relations most of the time. I'm, by the way, descendants of Arab Jews. My grandparents were members of Jewish communities in Arab countries. Some of the communities have been there for thousands of years. The four of them have arrived to Israel in the 1930s as teenagers because they wanted to establish their homes in Israel. One grandparent arrived from Egypt, another one arrived from Iraq, two others arrived from Yemen. So yes, they spoke Arabic, they lived, the culture, they knew the culture, they had Arab neighbors. It was never an issue. I think the major issue started in 1947 when the United Nations adopted the Resolution 181, the partition resolution that called for the establishment of two states in the Holy Land, of a Jewish state and of an Arab state. I think this resolution meant a lot of concessions to both national movements, both to the Jewish national movement and to the Arab national movement, because I would say both nations, both national movements wanted the whole territory for themselves. But what happened is that the Jewish national movement accepted the partition resolution, and the Arabs, unfortunately, rejected that. And not only did they reject that, they said, we want the whole territory for ourselves. We are not agreeing to the partition of the land for Jews and Arabs. But not only that, but also they started a war. Not only the Palestinian Arabs, but also 7 Arab countries waged war against, the newly established state of Israel in 1948. And that's where I would say the political conflict really started. And unfortunately, we've been living under this conflict for 75 years now.
So let's talk about the humanitarian crisis in Israel. How do you see your government and the people of Israel responding to both the questions, the calls for more and more humanitarian assistance in the conflict?
So if let's address the humanitarian crisis in Israel. So what happened is that after October 7th, 30 Israeli communities have been destroyed, totally destroyed. More than a quarter of million of Israelis have been displaced from their homes, both in the south part of the country and the northern part of the country, and they're living, in temporary housing. It raises a lot of humanitarian issues because they don't have access to proper housing.
And
To
that information isn't as widely circulated. So you're saying that thousands of Israelis are displaced because of the
250,000, and that's the official numbers. I
okay.
have every reason to believe that the actual numbers are much higher, but let's stick to the official numbers. We're talking about 250,000 Israelis, a quarter of a million of Israelis who have been displaced from their homes because of the recent conflict. They don't have access to housing, medical services, education services, proper nutrition. It's a major issue for us, and we're trying to deal with that as much as we can.
Okay. And when I said talk about the humanitarian crisis, obviously I was thinking about what's happening with the Palestinian people, and I had not focused on the likelihood or possibility of there being a crisis in Israel itself. So, what does that mean? What does my understanding that I've revealed tell you about how the world understands what's going on?
That's very interesting. That's a very and this is part of my frustration because while there's definitely, I understand the humanitarian issue in Gaza, I can definitely refer to that. It's a major issue. I do not turn my eyes away of that. But at the same time, there is a major humanitarian issue in Israel too. Unfortunately, as as you very honestly, confessed, this is not something you were aware of. This is not something that you usually see on the media here, and this is a source of a lot of frustration to me because I feel that in some cases the coverage is, I would say, is a way in a way one-sided. There's a lot of coverage to the Palestinian suffering, and there's a lot of Palestinian suffering. I do not deny that, but at the same time, there's a lot of suffering in Israel, and unfortunately, that gets less, I would say, coverage or attention.
You mentioned that 100 of the hostages had been released, but there remain more than 100 still
Right.
in captivity. What's the status of that? What happened? Why did the talks break down and the exchanges end after 7 days of a ceasefire?
Right. We had an agreement that was brokered by some of our neighbors, Egypt, Qatar, and also with a lot of help of the American administration that established in the beginning 4 days of pause of the war in return to the release of 50 hostages, and then the agreement was that for every additional 10 hostages that would be released by Hamas, Israel would pause the operation, the military operation, for one additional day. So altogether, we had 7 days of pause in the war. And then Hamas decided, and that's, I'm citing President Biden, the American administration. It's not my call. Hamas decided not to prolong that, not to release more hostages. And as President Biden said, the understanding is that they did not want to release more Israeli women who are in captivity in Gaza right now because they didn't want the world to hear the story about what happened to them
Mhm.
while they were in captivity. And one could only imagine what these words mean. I can share with you that we have a lot of evidence, we're still gathering, but we have a lot of evidence to, at least, I would say, to the following thing. We have a lot of evidence to a systematic, massive rapes and sexual violence against Israeli women and men that were perpetrated by Hamas during the October 7th massacre. We're talking about tens of cases of rapes, of sexual atrocities that one could not imagine, and I'm not going to be graphic to describe them right now, but abuse in the most possible terms of the human body perpetrated by Hamas, both to Israeli women but also men. And by the way, it took us. You asked me just 5 minutes ago, how come I didn't know about the humanitarian situation in Israel?
Mhm.
It took us more than almost 2 months for the United Nations to acknowledge that. We're talking about the UN Women. It is the United Nations agency that is responsible for the well-being and for the advancement and for the safety of women all around the world. They refused for almost 2 months to acknowledge that such thing happened in Israel. Why? It's a very good question. For me, the basics is the internal bias against Israel that exists in many international bodies, including the United Nations. And that is very deplorable because women are women. Rape is rape. Sexual violence is sexual violence. And all cases should be condemned unequivocally.
Help me understand Hamas from your point of view. You've
Yes.
declared that your country has declared that it will dismantle, actually eradicate the organization. Talk about that some more. I know we've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to be mindful
Sure.
of the time. And before we go, I want to make sure that we talk about what you call maybe the call for moral clarity. You talked
Yes.
about rape is rape, sexual violence, murder is murder, and all of that has to do with what we must um, uh, come from and look at with moral clarity. So talk about that. And I also want to give you and invite you to talk about anti-Semitism, both in this country and on U.S. campuses, and maybe around the world. How does it look at this moment? And where do we go as a human family to figure out how we all can co-create futures that protect and sustain life for every human being?
Absolutely, thank
But
you. So
talk about
Hamas,
Hamas
let's start
first.
with your question about Hamas, because
Mhm.
Hamas is the name is an acronym in Arabic of Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, the Islamic movement of resistance. It was based on the Islamic Brotherhood, that is a movement that goes all across the Arab world, also in Israel. In Israel, they have a political party that is represented in our parliament, in the Knesset. They were also in the previous government, they were part of the government, of the ruling government. Basically, Israel is the only country in the region where the Islamic Brotherhood has political representation in the government, in the coalition. They are they're illegal in some Arab country, and in Israel, the Jewish democratic country, they have a political representation and took part in the government, just to add to the complexity and to the diversity of Israel. But in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank, since the late 80s, they took more a form of a terror organization that is dedicated to, as their covenants say, officially say, to the killing of Jews and to eradicate the state of Israel. And this is what they've been trying to do through two intifadas, when they blew up buses and restaurants, as you remember, in the early 2000s. And they are now ruling the Gaza Strip. And I want to say one word about the Gaza Strip, because some people, I would say out of ignorance, out of not knowing the facts, are saying that Israel is occupying the Gaza Strip. And the truth is, the facts are that Israel left the Gaza Strip in 2005. For more than 18 years now, there hasn't been a single Israeli or a single Jew in the Gaza Strip, not a soldier, not a settler. So for 18 years, the Palestinians have been ruling the Gaza Strip on their own. We were hoping when we left the Gaza Strip that the Palestinians be able to build an independent, prosper, free society. Unfortunately, what happened is that Hamas took over the Gaza Strip, and Hamas have been ruling the Gaza Strip for the past 17 years. And this is exactly where violence from the Gaza Strip towards Israel started. Okay, as you remember, from 2008, a year after they took over the Gaza Strip, they started shooting rockets and missiles towards Israeli civil population. And this is why we all remember that every year or every other year, there is another violent round with the Gaza Strip. What happened now on October 7th is unprecedented, but because not only did they shoot thousands of missiles towards Israeli population, but they also invaded Israel, Israeli territory, Israeli civil communities, leading to the massacre of 1,200 people. And right now, what we're doing in the Gaza Strip is that we're doing not only an air operation, but a ground operation. By the way, it comes with a very high price for Israel. For us, the easiest thing to do would just bomb Hamas from the air. But we understand that bombing from the air would come with a very high price to the civil population. So we're entering a lot of, military forces, ground forces to the Gaza Strip to do as much as we can. This is war. War is a horrible thing. Unfortunately, in war also civilians are getting killed. It is horrible. Every civilian, every child, every mother, every father that is getting killed, it is a devastating situation. But we're fighting Hamas and we're going after Hamas because what they did in the Gaza Strip is that they built the largest underground infrastructure in the world. We're talking about more than 500 kilometers. That's 300 miles of underground tunnels. Hamas militants are hiding in the underground tunnels while they're using the civilians on ground in hospitals, in schools, in residential buildings as human shields. They're hiding behind their civilians. And what we're trying to do is direct as much as we can the Hamas operatives, kill them, eradicate them. Yes, because they're terrorists. We want to make sure that in a matter of weeks or months, the vast majority of Hamas infrastructure and terrorists will not be able to operate anymore. Okay, and then the Gazans, the civilians in Gaza, and we hear more and more Gazans speaking openly and freely. And they have a lot of threats from Hamas, but they're speaking freely about their need to be released from Hamas, to live independently without Hamas, to live freely. And this is what we're trying to achieve. We are very much aware to the humanitarian cost in the Gaza Strip. There's unfortunately civilians that are getting killed. We try to evacuate the civilians from the war zones. We try to make sure that enough humanitarian aid is entering from Egypt to the Gaza Strip. We're talking about medicine, about food, about water. Hamas was bombing the water pipes that were going from Israel, bringing water from Israel to the Gaza Strip. Why? Because they want a humanitarian disaster. Because they believe and understand that only if there's a humanitarian disaster would the world intervene to try to stop Israel. They don't care about their own civilians. So what Israel did is that we fixed the water pipes going from Israel to Gaza Strip, and they bombed them again and again. And we're fixing that again and again because we want to make sure that the civilian population has all the water, all the medicine, all the food that they need for the meantime during this war, because we want them to go back to their homes when we finish the job with Hamas, hopefully in a matter of weeks.
What does moral clarity mean in the context of war?
More clarity means that people need to understand why we don't war, we want peace. Actually, as President Biden said, before October 7th, we were working on enhancing the peace in the Middle East. 3 years ago, we signed wonderful agreements, the Abraham Accords, that brought much more peace to the Middle East. We have many more Arab countries who have now peace with Israel. The United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Bahrain. We have had peace with Egypt and Jordan for many years now. We want to bring more Arab countries into the peace circle. Mr. Biden has worked very hard to bring Saudi Arabia, probably the most important Arab country, into the circle of peace with Israel. We were on the verge of achieving the peace, and then October 7th happened. And the Saudis want that too, right after the war on Hamas, to get back to negotiations on peace, because we need more peace with our Arab neighbors. So this is the moral clarity we need to understand. We need people to understand who wants peace and who wants war. We need people to understand that we try to be very clear about our goals. We fight against Hamas. We want to eradicate Hamas, and we want to bring the hostages back home. At the same time, we want to have peace with the Palestinian people, because they are neighbors. We have no other option but having peace with them. And this is I would say, our strategic goal.
Is there a faction within the Israeli population or power dynamic that prefers war, that is seeking war against the Palestinians for whatever reason?
I don't think so. There's definitely a conflict that has been going on for 75 years now. There's a territorial dispute with the Palestinians. This is why we engage in multiple peace negotiations with the Palestinians under President Clinton, under President Obama. President Biden has served as vice president. He was very much involved in that. Under President Bush, by the way, each time we were, and I refer you to President Clinton. He just again reaffirmed that just a few weeks ago. Each time we were on the verge of achieving peace, with huge concessions from Israel. Israel agreed that the whole West Bank and the Gaza Strip, basically 99% with more land swaps, will be the independent Palestinian state. And we were on the verge of achieving that. They always refused. Why? I don't have good answers. But this is what President Clinton says. This is what President Bush says. This is what President Biden said. So we have to understand why the Palestinians have consistently refused to making peace with Israel, even when they had the chance to establish an independent Palestinian state on all the territories of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
In our last 2 minutes, talk about your assessment of the increase of anti-Semitism, both in the U.S. in general and on U.S. campuses. What's going on, and what do you want to happen to mitigate and to eliminate?
This is my biggest concern. The rise of anti-Semitism is tremendous. The numbers are really scary. We see the rise in anti-Semitic incidents here in America, as you mentioned, on university campuses, but also on the streets, has risen since October 17, 300% and maybe more than that. It is very scary. Why it is happening? Because what I feel right now is that a lot of people mix between the political question and the legitimacy of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. And since the vast majority of Jews in America, the existence of Israel as a national, homeland, as a Jewish and democratic Jewish country. And I have to say, while Israel is a Jewish state, it is a Jewish and democratic state. We have 21% of our citizens are Arabs. The vast majority of them are Muslims. They are integrated in our society. They enjoy equal rights. They serve as the Supreme Court justices. They serve as diplomats. They serve as commanders in the Gaza Strip. Right now, there are many Israeli Arab citizens who are fighting in the Gaza Strip against Hamas. They're equal citizens in Israel. But many now, and this is very hurtful for me, many doubt the right of Israel to exist as a country. When we hear on university campuses and on the streets, demonstrations saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What they're saying is that from River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea, that today consists of the state of Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip, what they say the whole territory should be a Palestinian state. They actually called for the elimination of the state of Israel, for ethnic cleansing of 7.5 million Jews of color like me, white Jews, brown Jews, black Jews. They call for ethnic cleansings of all these Jews. This is racist. This is anti-Semitic, and it's very, very wrong, and it makes me very much concerned.
Finally, what's the relationship between Israel and Black America? What exists? What would you like? What parallels do you see in our unique stories and unique histories?
There are so many parallels that I can see, so many equivalences I can draw, because we're two people who for many, many years struggled slavery, struggled depression, struggled oppression, and we always believe in a peaceful fight for freedom. And this is something that really stood out in the 60s during the civil rights movement, when the late Martin Luther King, who, by the way, always spoke very positively about the Jewish state of Israel. But when Martin Luther King marched for freedom in Selma and in Washington, D.C., he was always surrounded by Jewish rabbis who supported the cause, who said the fight for Black liberation, the fight for civil rights is a Jewish fight, and we are part of this movement. And I truly believe that also today we need to continue this partnership. I personally have been working a lot to create outreach to African American communities here in Chicago, in Minnesota, all across the Midwest, because I believe that we're sisters and brothers. Sometimes there are some differences about political issues, we are able to speak that out because our goal is common, and the common goal is for freedom, for human rights, for civil rights, and I think we should do that together.
How are you handling division within the Israeli community, within the Jewish world? Because there are rabbis that are considered progressives who have also decried the Israeli response to the October 7th massacre, and they are calling for Israel to restrain or to discontinue its movement in Gaza. How does that dialogue play out within the Israeli and Jewish community?
I respect every voice, and I respect, and I think it's beneficial that I would say the diversity of opinion also among the Jewish community. This is something that's important. It makes us stronger. I have to say at the same time that the vast majority of the members of the Jewish community stand very, very strongly with Israel. With Israel needs to defend itself, with Israel war on Hamas, and with Israel, struggle to have to maintain the diversity that we have today in our country. Diversity of Jews of all colors, the diversity of religions that we have, diversity of ethnicities that we have in our country. This is something that I think that unite the vast majority of Jews in America and in Israel, by the way.
Consul General Yinam Cohen, thank you so very much for visiting with me and for sharing the information, the point of view, the analysis, the background. And I'm hoping, as I said in the beginning, that this is step one in a series of ongoing conversations. I want my viewers to know that our intention is to reach out to people with different points of view. And our objective is simply more information, not less. Clarity and constructive dialogue. I think our mutual aim is peace among human beings.
Absolutely.
And for all human beings. Sir, I thank you. I appreciate
Thank you for inviting me. It's been an honor. Thank you.
And we'll be in touch to keep the conversation going. Thank you.
I look forward to that. Thank you.
All right. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll take a break here and for some sponsorship information. And when I come back, I'm hoping that my colleague Yogi Senna will join, and we'll sort of do a debrief and talk about what we heard and more. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Are you or someone you know recovering financially from the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown, or any other reason? If so, help is available. Findhelp.org is a site to find a wide range of resources, including food, medical care, and more. The best part is based on your zip code. Visit findhelp.org, enter your zip code and the service you need. You'll get a map directing you to the organizations that can help you. Help is waiting at findhelp.org. If you need help starting anew, findhelp.org is the site for you. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome back to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Again, I want to thank Consul General for the Midwest, for the government of Israel, Yinam Cohen, Consul General of Israel for the Midwest. He's a career diplomat with 16 years of experience in the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Great conversation. Thank him, and we hope to continue and broaden the conversation as well. Well, I've got my colleague and friend Yogi Senna, who is joining the program from Bahia. And Yogi, I wanted to get impressions. You put some questions in the note as we were talking, but what I wanted to do is simply afford the Consul General the opportunity to lay out the story, the narrative, the point of view. And I think he did that. He did well. I appreciated that. And I did not want to have anything that would be an adversarial or confrontational interview. And so what I'm glad you have been monitoring this, and be glad to have your comments, your thoughts, your impressions. I don't want this conversation to be exclusively about that. Let's talk about the other things in the world we talk about as well. But first of all, reaction to the comments of Consul General Yinam Cohen. What went through your mind? What did you hear?
Well, shalom, greetings. I'm gonna start by disclosing something that you might not know about me, Al. I have mitochondrial Jewish blood. So technically, I'm a Jew. My mom lineage is Sepharadis, Marranos, right? Spanish and Portuguese Jews that immigrated to Brazil during the colonial times. Anyway, but that said, I say that also to preempt if anything I'm gonna say is gonna be considered anti-Semitic, right? So I am part of the people of Israel on the diaspora, as well I'm part of the African diaspora. Of course, what is predominant me culturally and racially and consciously is my Africanness, my Yorubaness. Nonetheless, I got to acknowledge that I do have Jewish blood through mother lineage. Well, so Mr. Cohen, he's descendant of the lineage of the priests of the Temple of Israel. His last name means that Cohen, Kohan, Cohen. So there are several variations, and he is a Mizrahi. He's a Mizrahi Jew, or possibly also with Sepharad Jews that he mentioned that part of his family is from Egypt, right? Even though there was 4,000 years also Jewish population in Egypt, the Jewish and the Muslim, the Moors, only got expelled from Portugal and Spain. They went to Egypt, Tunisia, Turkey principally, and Israel, what was called then Palestine. So we cannot forget to acknowledge that until 1948, the name was Palestine. That probably create the perceptions also that the people that were living there has the presumption to claim from the river to the sea. So, in my opinion,
hold up for a second. I distinctly remember him saying that his parents arrived there in the 1930s when they were teenagers, but he described their arrival and their intention at that time is to go to Israel. So the notion of Israel as a place existed before. It wasn't just something created by the
exactly,
UN action.
it's Zionism. So it was started. Zionism is a national identity movement that was created in England in the late 1800s, which started to reivindicate the return of Jews to the Holy Land. So this movement was created by I think Mr. Hearst, that actually was not a Jew. And this problem that we see in Israel nowadays, remember that I mentioned that the Consul General, he's a Mizrahi. So the problem started when the Ashkenazi Jews start to immigrate in mass. First, during the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire, those Jews that were in the Balkans and in Turkey, and then the upheaval times of First and Second World War, that the Europeans, the Ashkenazi Jews, move in mass to Israel. And they, in my opinion, you made a very interesting parallelism between the history of Black Americans and what's going on there, and I think there was an attempt to equate our suffering with theirs. We are, as a Black Americans, Black Pan-Americans, Pan-Africans, Africans of the diaspora, we never had the possibility of create a state and then oppress the population of this state. So therefore, this analogy is not very, very accurate. So he failed to address some of the questions of the disproportionality of the response of the government of Israel. Again, my opposition is not to the state of Israel per se, but it is centered in the present government of the state of Israel. That we need to remember that until October 7th, there were there were happening manifestations, rallies of the Israeli population against the what was happening in Israel, where they are trying to curtail the power of the judiciary and have a more authoritarian government. That was the tendency of the government of Israel. Also about what the council was talking about, uh, depicting Hamas as a terrorist organization. So my personal opinion is the following. I personally, despise what Hamas did. It's not justifiable, in any form, kill innocent people. But also, there are innocent people that have been killed before the invasion of Israel by Hamas, and subsequently in a proportion that doesn't make sense. So the presumption that they're going to eliminate Hamas, the structure of Hamas, the leadership, is ludicrous, because they're going to create more Hamas or other more virulent kind of movement with the youth that are witnessing what's going on. So, but I understand that his job is to defend the government of Israel, but I have to pinpoint the also inside of Israel, what is, in my point of view, and other people who are observing this, it is the Ashkenazi politics that start to dominate. So it's the European Jews that dominates the life in Israel, and they also do discriminate against the Mizrahi, that the council is one. They do discriminate greatly against the Ethiopians Jews, the Beta Israel, what the Ethiopian Jews are called. So they are trying to present. He is trying to present Israel is a totally benign country or a government, and it's not true. But also, as I say, I understand that his job is to give the version of the government of Israel. But as you mentioned, there is a great number, a great proportion, an important proportion of Jews that are not in agreement with what is going on inside of Israel and outside of Israel.
Let's pivot. Thank you for the commentary and the analysis. And we invite others who are listening now or later to weigh in and to give points of view. I think it's important to have these conversations, Yoji, and to afford each other a chance to describe the world as we see it, the conflict as we see it, and solutions that we see and that we seek. And the more we talk,
I just want to add something.
Go ahead.
In certain way,
Sure.
the parallelism I see is the state of Israel replicating what the government of the United States did to Native Americans and to blacks. So they are corralling the Palestinians in a place. As I mentioned to you yesterday, the state of Israel was created in 1948 with great effort of a Brazilian diplomat called Osvaldo Aranha. And already in 1948, it was determined that space that until then was called Palestine, or the British Mandate of Palestine, right? There was a resolution of the United Nations that was to be a place for both. I understand that at the time the parts didn't want to live together. Those people, they are already feeling themselves to be natives, and this great influx of European Jews that change everything. So it's again a form of European colonialism, in this case with a Jewish flavor instead of a Christian flavor as it was in the Americas. But it's the same template in a smaller place with a lot more weapons, technology, and there is no justification whatsoever to what's happening to the population. So I'm sorry, yes, 250,000 Israelis right now are displaced and suffering some hardships, but that nullifies that close to 2 million people are passing to that. So it sounds like what we call in the United States white tears.
Let's change the subject a little bit. I want to talk a bit about the article you sent me today. I think you sent it to me about the brothers in Argentina, the Afro-descendant brothers in Argentina. And if you remember, talk about that story. I read the English version. You sent it in Spanish and Portuguese as well. But a person who describes himself as a Afro-descendant activist talked about the murder of his brother at the hands of police in Rio, I think it was.
Was in Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires, okay. And it was because the brother interceded on behalf of some Brazilian Black men that were being detained by the police. That's as far as I got. Tell the story. Something I didn't understand. Yeah.
That's the story is the history of the story what happened to Jose Acosta Martinez. He was a good friend of mine. I feel a little emotional about. He was my student of capoeira in Argentina. In a certain way, I was responsible of this, the creation of awareness about his right as a Black person. What happened to him? I was already living in the United States. He was, along with me, one of the founders of Movimiento Negro de Argentina. So what happened is something that also happened to me hundreds of times. So I lived in Argentina for 11 years, and in this time of 11 years, I slept in a police station at least 200 times for the simple reasons that walking on the street, any policeman would approach me and ask my ID and take me to the endless justification, the probable cause, and I was suspicious for being Black. And I would sleep. They have the prerogative of detaining me for 48 hours to averiguate my antecedents, my records, if I have record or if you was wanted. In my case, it happened that I would call to the consulate, a Brazilian consulate, to come pick me up. Until many days, the consul one day asked the commissary, how come you bring him every day under the guise of checking his record? So you haven't checked his record yet. Every day you bring him, and how come something new happened and he's walking free, and the justification that you are bringing him because he might be a suspect. So what happened to Jose is what's typical of Argentina. So a country that's highly militarized as the mindset was, coming out of a long dictatorship in Argentina. And what they did to Jose could have happened to me and has happened to other people. He was beaten to death inside of the police station because he went to defend illegal arrest or harassment of two Afro-Brazilian people that were in Brazil. In Argentina,
like you, right?
Yes,
like you.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and something that, exactly, like could have been me too, because it has happened to me that all of a sudden, like before I went to the United States, 2 days before, I was in a police station in in Buenos Aires, right? Because, and actually I was a victim of some sort of crime, and I end up in jail. But I was lucky that one of my students was a lawyer, and she put an habeas corpus because I was disappeared. That's Argentina is famous for desaparecido. I was not in the books of the commissary that I was in there. So probably I might have disappeared and not gone to the United States if not I had a lawyer for that case. But Argentina is a very racist people, even though that have very strong history of the presence of Black people in Argentina. Until the 1960s, 60% of the population of all the major cities of Argentina were of Black people.
That's amazing. And so there's been a conscious attempt to erase the idea.
No, conscious, no, a legal attempt to erase it. Like
Mhm.
Brazil did too, but because Brazil, the population was bigger, but it was similar in kind of the same time that started people move from Europe to Israel. The Brazilian and the Argentinian government, more than the others, incentivize the immigration. They are applying quotas of immigration of Europe, offering lands, grants, and everything to whiten the population. In Argentina, they were more successful because also the black population were the males, black males were the infantry of the Argentinian army during the triple war. There was a war that was between Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina together against Paraguay. So the infantry in the 1800, infantry is the soldier that goes on foot with a rifle in the hand. Is the one that are killed first, right? And then comes the cavalry, right? So, and that is the reason there was a great incentive of miscegenation, right? And was a policy of annihilation of the black male population. And in Argentina also happened in the end of the 19th century an epidemic of yellow fever that guess who suffered more? The black population. And guess who didn't have any medical assistance? The black population. So when we talk about Argentina, generally what people think about is tango. It takes two to tango. And what tango is, the word, if you listen, tune your ears, tango is an African word. Tango, the tambo, drum. And there is also this all whitening of the culture of tango and invisibilization of the tango origin as a black culture that is now returning. Now there is a strong movement of black Argentinians because not only there is Afro-Brazilians and Afro-Uruguayans, but there was a huge influx of Afro-Peruvians. Also, importantly, is a great influx of Senegalese. The street vendors generally are Senegalese, right? So we have great, for example, icons of the Argentinian culture. They were black, you know, Oscar Alemán, Gabino Ezeiza. We have nowadays one of the reggae star of Latin America is Fidel Nadal. He is one African Argentinian that his family are in Argentina for 300-400 years, and he plays a very good reggae music. Yes.
So, are you still in contact with the brother of Jose?
Yeah, his brother is. I can call him right now.
Well, I would love to get him on the program. Let's talk about the stories. I think the story is worth telling. You know, one thing in the story that I saw that I didn't understand that I'll ask you about. There was. Here's one paragraph. It says, in December 2000, I participated as an Afro-descendant activist as director of SOS Racismo Argentina, COF AVI, which is Commission of Relatives of Innocent Victims, in the Citizens Conference of the Americas pre-Durban Third World Summit Against Racism, Discrimination, Xenophobia, and other related forms of intolerance, organized by the UN in Santiago de Chile. And I prepared a note. His note said, in quotes, in Argentina, for acts of structural systemic racism and institutional racism and police violence, an Afro-descendant activist, Jose Delfin Acosta Martinez, his brother, was arrested for coming out in defense of two young Afro-Brazilians who were arrested for the color of their skin. Now, here's the part that I'm not clear about if it's a mistake or not. It says, and they killed several policemen with kicks and sticks inside a police station. Then it goes on.
The police killed, several policemen killed Jose with kicks and batons.
So that they killed him. That's what that means.
Yeah, he was killed inside the police station. He was
Okay,
taken.
so
They forgot about the Afro-Brazilian they were harassing, and took
mhm.
Jose to the police station, and there they violated him.
They killed him. So the English translation is not clear, and that's what I was going to
Yeah,
ask you
I
about
need
that.
to
But this is
revise
good.
that.
So it reads as if the Afro-Brazilians or somebody went into the station and killed several policemen. What it means, though, is that several
Yeah,
policemen killed him, Acosta.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
got it. Well, so what's the status of that whole case?
Well, the status
The
is
article
that
says that they kept escalating it to United Nations because the country kept ignoring this particular case in the same way it ignored the existence of Black people. So the erasure of the idea of Black people in Argentina is consistent with the evasion or the erasure of the record of the murder of one particular Black man, that those are one and the same policy and practice in Argentina, which is against the humanity of Black people, Afrodescendientes. That's what I take from this. Does that sound right?
yeah, this case has been resolved, and the Judicial Court of the Organization of American States, as well UN, has recommended the Argentinian government to pay reparations,
Mhm.
and they still are avoiding it. The government, be it the one that just left, that was progressive government, and the prior one that was run by Macri, that was a center right person. So the Argentinian government is been ignoring the resolutions given by the international bodies, recommending, or because right, those bodies cannot mandate, uh, and has been proven in court the guilty of the states, and the state of the Argentinian state is still dodging.
Yoji, this has been a good conversation. Thank you. Let's do this. Let's get the brother
Yes,
just to tell the story. I think it'll be a great conversation. And I think important, as you've mentioned, there isn't a lot of knowledge about the presence of African people in Uruguay, in Paraguay, in Chile, and certainly in Argentina. And this begins to elevate. And I think the more we elevate and teach each other about our presence throughout the hemisphere, the more we have chances to collaborate and to benefit each other and humanity by the
exactly.
knowledge that we bring to each other.
Pan-Africanism, it's a must. Also,
All right.
before we go, I mentioned you that the Banco do Brasil, that is the state bank here in Brazil,
Mhm.
has been condemned to pay reparations for slavery because they admitted their participation on the slave trade, on the slave commerce. So here in Brazil, things are happening. So it's like the Fed be recommend to pay reparations. So seems here in Brazil, at least this is advancing. The
Mhm.
acceptance of the participation of financial institutions, educational institutions, universities, and so on in the slave trade. And the church, principally here in Brazil, the church, the
The
Catholic
church.
Church.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, here in Brazil, if you meet any Latin American that has last name Santos, and they are not white, Santos means the saints. Are
Mhm.
they, or Jesus, Nascimento? Those are last
Mhm.
names that are given to slaves owned by the churches. So the last name Santos is the saints. The Jesus, Gabriel de Jesus, the great soccer player, the Brazilian that's in Europe. De Jesus, nobody has a family. The Jesus family, it's a last name created by the church, Catholic Church, to apply to the enslaved people. So we all need to know this, and new, better times are coming. As like Dr. Yimar said yesterday, at least here it seems that part of the society is in a honeymoon with Black culture, right?
Mm.
And we are
Mhm.
in a positive evidence everywhere, even though I cannot forget to mention that the rate of assassinations of black youth by the police here in Brazil, the rate is staggering. If that was in the United States, probably something would have happened. But daily, weekly, it's 60 people in my state only. So imagine the other states. So we are under a public security crisis. Yesterday, of course, they also dismantled a gang that imported 40,000 weapons, rifles, and fuzzles to Brazil through Paraguay. And guess what? They look like people live on the favelas.
Nope.
So.
All right, my friend. We'll see you later. Take care.
Yeah. Peace.
All right. And we'll see you. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.
All right.